let's talk about the new changes to the Fusion 360 personal license agreement. I'm actually traveling right now, that's why the different scene, but I've been seeing so much confusion in the forums that I didn't want to wait another couple of days to get home to make this video. If you haven't heard yet, Fusion has just updated their personal license agreement, the free Fusion 360 license. And if you've been following the comments in the Fusion 360 forums or in the social media pages, you would think that Fusion just decided to just take their ball and go home. That Fusion just abandoned the hobbyists, which is absolutely not the case. It seems like many are just commenting without actually taking the time to fully read the new license, and there seems to be a lot of confusion. So I thought I'd go over the major changes and try to address the areas where I think there may be quite a bit of misunderstanding. Okay, first of all, the personal license is still free. And by the way, the changes are only to the free personal license. The startup and the education and the commercial licenses have not changed. And the personal license is meant for those doing home-based, non-commercial design, manufacturing, and fabrication projects. The Fusion team has been pretty adamant that this is not going away. The problem that Fusion is having is that many are abusing the license. They're using Fusion for commercial purposes under the personal license when they should be buying the commercial license. If you recall, Fusion's hobbyist license used to pretty much be that you had access to the full software as long as you were not making more than $100,000 a year. And if you were making more than 100K, then you were asked to buy the commercial license. The problem is that there was no real way to enforce this. It was the honor system. It was easy to abuse, and it was abused. Fusion has tried to address this in the past by creating a stronger distinction between their hobbyist license and the startup, education, and the commercial license, but that didn't seem to solve the confusion and misuse. So this brings us to today and the new terms of the personal license agreement. I'll leave a link to the Fusion 360 blog where you can find the details of the new agreement and this chart which nicely summarizes the differences between the old license and the new. Okay, so let's go over the major changes. Well, actually, let me first start with what's not changing. Design and 3D modeling. You'll still have access to all the design and 3D modeling tools. That hasn't changed. You can still export for 3D printing. You can export to your 3D print utility of choice or save as an STL file. In fact, if you're using Fusion 360 primarily for 3D printing, your workflow is barely going to be affected. You can still do everything you were able to do before. You can still export for laser cutting and 2D routing. Now, this was one of the areas of confusion because DXF will no longer be available as an export option under File, Export. But you can still right-click on a sketch and select Save as DXF for laser cutting and 2D routing. Another area of confusion I saw was in regards to scripts and add-ins downloaded from the App Store. You can still, for example, go to the App Store and download that Shaper utility app to export SVGs or the Voronoi sketch generator, which, by the way, I've got a great project lined up using this app that you'll get to see in my next video. So, okay, App Store, still there. The confusion here has to do with what's labeled as extension access. Extensions in this case is referring to manufacturing extensions available for purchase, which is found here under the little wrench, not the App Store. Okay, machining. You still have access to 2, 2.5, and 3-axis milling, plus CAM toolpath simulation. This is another area of confusion. The simulation workspace will not be available in the free license. This is the workspace used to stress test your part with loads to determine if your part will fail. I think many are confusing this with the CAM simulation, which will still be available in the free license. 3+2 4-axis and 5-axis milling will now only be available in the paid subscription, as will automatic tool change capability. The drawing workspace will be limited to single sheet and print only option for export. Rendering will be only local, so no cloud rendering in the free version, and generative design will not be available. Okay, now I've saved these two things for last because they seem to be the two items that most are upset about. The first is no export option for step files. You can still import step files, but you will no longer have the ability to export step files with the free personal license. And what I think will be the biggest impact to most people is that you'll only be allowed to have 10 active documents at once. Now, this is another one where there seems to be a lot of confusion, so let me explain. Your project management will be unchanged, so you'll still have access to all your projects and files, and you'll still be able to have an unlimited amount of designs. You'll simply have to select 10 of those designs to be your active designs. The rest will have to be in an inactive state. You can always go back and forth between what is active and what is inactive. So when you reach your 10 active capacity, you'll have to deactivate one of your active designs before you can open another one. A question many had in regards to the 10 active designs limitation was how this would work with assemblies. For example, I have this enclosure that I designed of the Adafruit Circuit Playground board. And if I remove the top cover here, you'll see that each one of these components are their own separate designs. You'll see here in my list of parts that I have a separate design for the battery charger, the battery, the circuit playground board, and a slide switch here. Now, under the new license agreement, if these designs are active and I bring them in to my new design, it would count against the 10 design limit. However, I don't need these to be active in order to bring them into this assembly. So I could simply inactivate all these and still bring them in and be able to work on my enclosure. And none of these 4 would count against my 10 design limit. And if I did need to make a change, for example, to my battery charger module here, I would simply go back in now and activate that battery charger design. Make my change, I can deactivate it, and then continue working on my enclosure. So the confusion here was that if you brought a model into an assembly, that model would count against your 10 design limit. And based on the new updated blog post from Fusion 360, the answer is no. As long as each of these are inactive, they will not count against your 10 design limit. The 10 design limit is really the only change that I think will affect me. The limit will go into effect January 2021, so you have some time to mentally prepare for this one. 90% of what I do with Fusion 360 is for 3D printing, and nothing is really changing with the design and 3D printing tools. I can still export the XFs for laser cutting. Plugins will still be available, so I can still export SVGs if I need to. The CNC machines I have access to are all 3-axis. I currently don't have a need for 4 or 5-axis machining and don't have an automatic tool changer. To be honest, these sound like they should be premium features. I don't do that much rendering, and for the few times I'll need it, local rendering will be fine. I don't really use the animation, simulation, drawing, or generative design environments. So at the end of the day, I'll just have to be more organized with what designs are going to be active or inactive. I only tend to work with 1 or 2 designs at a time, so honestly, I don't expect that this will be much of an issue either. Now, having said all this, I did go ahead and purchase the commercial license. Not because of any limitations that I think I'll have with the free license, simply because I use Fusion 360 for commercial purposes. I create online courses in Fusion that I sell, and my courses do well and I generate an income from them, so it's the right thing to do. Now, the funny thing is that I'll be behind the commercial license, but I'll be using a different account that will limit me to the free license. The reason for this is that most people taking my classes are hobbyists and they'll be using the free version. So when I create my tutorials, I want to make sure I'm experiencing the same exact software that they're using. Also the same for my YouTube videos. I'll be using the free version because that is what I know many of you are using. Now, once in a while, I may show a premium feature for educational purposes if I think it'll be useful to compare. So Fusion is currently running a 40% off discount on the commercial license. You can purchase up to a 3-year license with the discount. So I went ahead and bought a 3-year license, which turned out to be $267 per year, which comes out to roughly $22 per month. Now, to put things in perspective, when I compare this to other software subscription costs of running my business, it's actually very reasonable. And there are countless subscriptions I have: website hosting, email software, royalty-free music sites, video editing software, and more. And even the software that I don't buy as a subscription, I tend to pay every few years to update anyway. I know that many hate the subscription model, but in some cases it actually doesn't turn out to be costlier, and in some cases it can even be a less expensive approach. Of course, this all depends on how often you update. And speaking of putting things in perspective, I really do think the right perspective is the key here. Let's say you just came back from attending your first Maker Faire and you were introduced to 3D printing, laser cutting, and CNC milling. And I approached you and said, hey, guess what? There's this really powerful software that lets you create designs for all three. It has amazing design capabilities. We're talking professional level design features, and allows you to export your models for fabrication with a 3D printer, laser cutter, and you can generate toolpaths for 3-axis machining. You'd say, sign me up. You wouldn't be complaining about the 10 active design limitations. Now, I get it. We don't like change, and the fact that Fusion 360 is changing stuff is not sitting well with some of us. And no one likes stuff taken away, especially when you've invested the time to learn the software. But it is free software, and it's still powerful free software. I think that one of the issues is that for some reason, some people don't tend to value software. At least they don't think it's something they should pay for. I mean, just read some of the comments on the forum. They begin with, I have a 3D printer, a laser cutter, a plasma cutter, and I'm just a hobbyist, and how dare you charge me for software? You're okay with paying for hardware and the tooling and materials, but for some reason you draw the line at the software that makes it all work. And as someone who sells a digital product, I'm fully aware of this mentality and never really quite understood it. People will actually send me angry messages telling me, how dare I sell an educational product, that I need to be giving it away for free. And I'm thinking, do you know how long it takes me to put this stuff together? All the planning to create a structured course, the filming, the editing, the re-recording, and the maintenance required to keep everything updated. Plus the gear and my own software expense to put it all together. So anyway, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on these changes? How do you think it will affect your workflow, if at all? What is the one change that will affect you the most? I can only speak from my perspective, and since I mainly use Fusion 360 for 3D printing and a little bit of laser cutting and CNC work, I may not fully understand the impact on other hobbyists and their workflow. If you're truly using Fusion 360 for hobby work and feel limited by the changes, I really want to hear from you in the comments. But I want specifics. What is the exact feature you need back and why? Also, if the new changes are a deal breaker for you and you decide to leave Fusion 360 altogether for greener pastures, where are you going? What are the other options out there that you are seriously considering, and why? All right, I look forward to reading the comments, and if I missed anything you thought I should have covered or have any further questions, leave them below as well. I'll see you next week with a new project. All right, take care.